Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to do something slightly different. On the heels of Brandon Sanderson's ridiculous Kickstarter that I'm sure you have heard about, I wanted to think through some of the authors that I would just throw my money at for a book, regardless of what it's about. So Brandon Sanderson has this Kickstarter for 4 books. Currently we have known nothing about them really, but people are backing this Kickstarter in their droves without knowing anything about the books that they are backing. So I wanted to tell you about the authors. I'm going to give you 5 authors that I would buy any book that they put out right now. These are my 5 auto-buy authors. And I am taking Brandon Sanderson out of the list because yes, I would throw money at Brandon for any book that he's willing to write, but he's not going to be included on this list. So number 1, first in this list, for long-time viewers of this channel, you will be very aware of this. This is one of my favorite authors of all time. It is Jim Butcher. He is the writer of the Dresden Files, which is one of my favorite series of all time. He wrote The Aeronauts Windlass, which is book 1 of the Cinder Spires, which I loved. And he wrote Codex Alera, which is a 6-book series that I am currently 4 books into and absolutely adoring. There is basically nothing that Jim could write that would stop me from wanting to read it. I absolutely adore Jim Butcher. I adore his books. The Dresden Files is my favorite urban fantasy series of all time. It's close to my favorite series of all time, no caveats. I love his writing. I think he does such a great job at giving us characters that are relatable and understandable, whether that's in the third-person perspective or the first-person perspective. And I just think he is such a brilliant author. I will buy any book that he puts out. The next few authors here are not going to be quite as well known as Jim, and in at number 2 is going to be an interesting one. So at number 2, I'm going to put in R.F. Quang. Now, if you don't know R.F. Quang, Rebecca Quang, she wrote the Poppy War series, the Poppy War trilogy. They were her debut books. She has a very interesting perspective on writing fantasy. She is a historian. She knows a lot about history and the politics of historical events, and she puts all of that into her books. Now, those of you who know my opinions on the Poppy War will know that I loved book 1 and book 2. I did not love the Burning God book 3 anywhere near as much. I think it got very bogged down, but the concepts, the way that R.F. Quang approaches fantasy is something that I am incredibly interested in. She does have the first book of a new series coming out this year called Babel, and I am super interested to read that, and I will basically be interested to read anything that she puts out in the near future because I love the concept. I love the way she approaches fantasy from a historical perspective and the slant that she puts on that. That in and of itself is worth the purchase of a book for me, no matter what history she's using, no matter what setup and world building she is surrounding around these historical events. I will always be interested to read what she is writing. Next up is an author I adore, and you will all know this from me. This is Daniel Abraham. Again, any book he writes I will buy, and this is for similar reasons to R.F. Quang. I love the way that Daniel Abraham deals with themes. The Long Price Quartet was the best series I read last year. I love the Long Price Quartet an inordinate amount, and I will buy anything that Daniel Abraham writes. I think the way he deals with themes, the way he does character work and character growth is just astounding. And the Long Price Quartet was the first series he ever wrote. I cannot imagine how much better he is going to have become in his character work and his approach to themes. If you haven't read the Long Price Quartet or anything from Daniel Abraham, it is very slow. It is a slow build fantasy, and this is the kind of the way he works. He works with atmosphere, he works with tone, he works with a lot of setup, and he works with plenty of thematic resonance. Now, if that is something that sounds interesting to you in your fantasy, Daniel Abraham is someone you should definitely look into, and for the foreseeable future, any book he writes will be an auto-buy for me. In at number 4 is someone who I don't necessarily read for the concept. I don't read for the approach and for the slow build, unlike R.F. Quang and unlike Daniel Abraham. This is someone who I read because it is fun and because the way he writes combat is just astounding. And that is the man up here, John Gwynne, okay? So here you can see The Shadow of the Gods, my special edition of Malice. I don't buy special editions very often, so that tells you something about John Gwynne's writing. He's well known for writing the Faithful and the Fallen series, of Blood and Bone, which is the follow-up trilogy to that, and as well his most recent series, the Bloodsworn Saga, book 2 of which is coming out in May. John Gwynne is interesting because he, particularly in the first series he wrote, it is relatively trope heavy. There's a lot of fantasy staples that are there. He is not innovative in his setup and setting in the same way that Abraham and Quang are, but he just writes so insanely well. The build-up he does for his character work is brilliant, and his combat scenes are just exquisite. They never feel wasteful, they never feel like they're there just for the battle. There's always stakes, characters are always evolving throughout them, and I think John Gwynne just does that so well. I am so excited for The Hunger of the Gods, which is coming out in May, and I feel like the Bloodsworn Saga may become my favourite fantasy series. It's certainly going to be up there if it continues anything like The Shadow of the Gods has. I absolutely adore John Gwynne, auto-by-author number 4. And my last author on this list is one who does not have many books out, not a huge back catalogue. Much like R.F. Quang, there's only one series from this author, and it's actually only a duology. Now, there are plenty of short stories he's written for different anthologies, but this is going to be Adrienne Martine, the author of the TX Kalan duology, so that is A Memory Called Empire and A Desolation Called Peace. This duology is currently my favourite sci-fi series to date. I adore Adrienne Martine's writing, her prose is brilliant, and much like Abraham, she has this wonderful slow build style. There's this atmosphere that we get, this really interesting tone, and we get a very focused view on tight-knit relationships between a few different characters. There's not a ginormous cast, but the cast that we do have interact interestingly, and their character growth and relationships are handled absolutely beautifully. A Memory Called Empire just had me hanging on every word, and not because it's a blockbuster plot, but just because it is written so exquisitely. The theming here is brilliant. Themes of language and translation are abundant in this duology, and it's just something that I really love. I have seen on Twitter that Adrienne Martine is not writing any more books directly in the TX Kalan series, but she is looking to write more books in this world and in this universe, and that is something that I am really excited for. Whether or not her new releases come in this universe or in some other setting, I am still super hyped, super excited to read more Adrienne Martine. I think she's going to be a rising star in the speculative fiction genre. I hope that's been interesting. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you want to see more of my thoughts, particularly on Adrienne Martine and the TX Kalan duology, there is a Should I Read the TX Kalan duology video up here for you to go and check out. I hope you have a lovely day, and I'll see you guys again soon.